Hello, welcome back to Actual Proper Podcast, and we are your hosts. I'm Reece Farkash, and my co-host, as you know, Twila Amato. How are you today, Twila?
We did this last week on the Patreon too.
I like doing
But I'm
it.
very good.
I'm Reece.
Thanks, Reece, for that sweet intro.
Mm-hmm.
So, life is still quarantined. But, we kind of want to move a little bit away from that because that's all we've been talking about forever now.
It's funny because
I
feel like, yes, we've been talking about it for forever, and of course you don't want to keep talking about it, especially if it's this kind of like entertainment kind of thing.
Yeah,
You know,
just
you
need
don't
some
want
new
to keep
content.
Yeah, you don't want to keep reminding people, but at the same time, because I am working in that field where I always see, COVID-19 news, and I write COVID-19 news stories. It's kind of just like, that's all I can think about because
That's your whole world, right?
That's my whole world. That's
at
my
work
reality.
and at home.
Yeah, so it's just like, well, what else do we talk about? Is there anything else? Like, what was life like before coronavirus? I don't know. I don't remember.
So let's not get into it this week. But I just wanted to say that what I've been seeing is that there's been a lot of cool sales on stuff during the quarantine. So if you want to get something and to like entertain yourself in the quarantine or whatever, there's a lot of cool sales like on right now. Like I was on Steam yesterday. There's a lot of really great sales on.
What is Steam? To those who may not know what it is.
So Steam is like a download client for like PC games on your computer. So you can buy any like so many different video games. Like basically the publishers will have a deal with Steam that you can download their games off Steam for PC. Okay. That's basically it. And you don't have a disc, you just download it onto your computer. So yeah, there's a lot of good sales like that going on right now, and just other places that you might look. There's a lot of cool sales on, so get something that will keep you occupied during this time. That's all.
There's definitely.
I kind of wanted to mention.
No, I know what you mean because I have been seeing a lot of sales as well. I mean,
of course,
during the times of plenty, I guess, like these are the things that I think I would have really taken advantage of,
right?
Because like I could afford it, but so I get a lot of like email notifications for Sephora, and obviously I have the app, so I get like app notifications on that, and then other places that I shop at a lot of the time, so the Body Shop, Lush, all these other things, Indigo /chapters to those who might not know, but so I get a lot of emails for those places, and the past little while I've been getting a ton of 50% discounts, and then 60% discounts, and then buy one get one free, and then all these things, and it's just like, oh, free shipping as well, because apparently they're doing their part to prevent more community transmission of COVID-19. And I feel very I feel very 50-50 about this whole thing, because on one hand I see that they're trying, and they're trying to keep their businesses afloat, and keeping people employed, but at the same time, like, dude, maybe read the room a little bit, like people are getting laid off and it's not a good time. And do you really think that just because you offer free shipping on all orders, that doesn't really make it any better necessarily, because at this time, these things, like, people are focusing on what's essential to them right now. They're just really trying to get by and like get groceries and the necessities. But I'm not saying this to say, don't buy that game on Steam. Do it if you can afford it. But that's what I mean, is like, I'm not trying to be like negative about it, but I do feel very like but also yay about it,
Right, they're not targeting the people who, if they miss a few months of work, like, no big deal. They're targeting the people who have money to spend, and just because they're out of work for a few months doesn't change that.
So it's a little difficult,
Yeah. crazy world. But speaking of something I did during the quarantine was that I've been watching a lot of movies, playing a lot of games, that kind of stuff that I did pre-quarantine. I rewatched the movie Avatar by James Cameron. Yeah, James Cameron's Avatar that came out like 2008, I want to say. Anyway,
that was a pretty good movie.
I haven't seen it since like 2013. And I saw it once in 2008 or 9. And I didn't remember anything about it. Saw it in 2013, and I'm like, this is a dope movie. I really like it. And then I went another like long period of time without watching it, so a lot of it faded from my mind. And then I watched it again like a couple weeks ago, and I was like, this movie is freaking amazing. It's amazing. Whatever your opinion about it is, like that it's a cheap ripoff, or it's not remarkable, it is actually quite remarkable. And that just because like plot elements are taken, or the overall theme, that doesn't stop it from being an incredible movie.
I thought it was actually a very good movie when I watched it, but I think the problem with Avatar was that it's kind of difficult to not have any follow up on a story. It doesn't.
Right, but there
quite
will be
stick.
follow up.
Right, but years and years after, right? Like
so many years.
That's sorry. That was kind of like the problem with that, because when I first watched it, I was like, oh, that's really interesting. That was
it's a
very
neat
well
idea,
done.
but there's no
it's a good
supplemental content.
Yeah, I feel like it had a really good world in it, and the
lore
is good. But if you don't, like you said, if you don't have supplemental content,
it'll fade quickly.
Yeah, you won't really remember. So I don't remember it being a flop, but the fact that there was no
yeah, it was the big
but the fact that there was no
for many
follow-up
years.
to me makes it a bit of a flop in that regard, because
a cultural flop.
Yeah, because there's like just no impact.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people have. But I do agree with that, but it is still an incredible movie.
Yeah, it's a pretty good movie, but I can't say I remember like a whole lot about it now, but whatever.
So I just wanted to say that, take a look into some movies that you haven't in a while.
For sure.
What else are you gonna do? Honestly.
Right, exactly. There's
but
not
that
much
was just
to
like
do.
an example for me that I wanted to share. Was like, I just rewatched something that I haven't in a long time.
Well, there are also some. There's
it was worth it. It was
also
a gem.
some new movies, other movies, but also TV shows that are now available in Netflix Canada.
Right.
So, go check that out. One of them being Community, which has been something that I've been looking forward to.
Yeah, big time. We've been watching it for.
I love Community. It's such a good show, and just it's such a very creative way to tackle like storytelling, so that's always really nice. But so check your Netflix homepage, see what's up and what's available. Even
though Netflix kind of sucks nowadays, they did
in
add
what way?
Content wise.
I
they
see.
did add Community, which is a bonus, I guess. If you want to rewatch it, it's so bingeable that it's good for binging.
I don't know how I feel necessarily if like it's with Netflix sucking or anything, just because like
their content library has dried up in the past like 6-7 years. Dried up,
I guess.
But
look,
it's due to all this new streaming services that came out. Like, it's not their fault,
right? But it's also like I just have, I think, like completely different interests than what like Netflix normally offers,
right.
So it's just like I watch a lot of other things that I'm just like, you can't find that on Netflix, so I'll go somewhere else, I guess, or just like not watch it at all.
Right. But even then, even if Netflix caters to whatever your interests are, their pool is really, really shallow
very
these days.
that's very true.
And again, no fault of their own. It's just oversaturation of the market.
That's true, but I did notice that they had, this is from a month back or so now, they added one of the wildly popular K-dramas recently, Crash Landing on You, and I've been meaning to watch that since it first came out, but I've never had the chance.
So what's it about?
I think, and I could be wrong, but the general idea is that there's this girl from South Korea who went on a sort of like paragliding adventure, as you do when you can afford it, I guess. But then some freak kind of like windstorm, basically like blows her away into like over the DMZ and like into North Korea, and then like literally just crash lands into freaking North Korea, and like like a North Korean soldier basically like saves her from a tree or something, and then like the rest
Right, and then
goes
she's
on
put in
from there.
prison forever, right?
I have no idea. That's why the show exists, just because you explore that idea. What happens to you if you end up in North Korea, like randomly?
Huh. That's interesting for sure.
So
Cool
I don't know.
stuff.
Like, I mean, that's just the stuff I guess that I'm kind of into. I'm really into like cheesy things like that, I guess.
It does seem like Netflix these days has a lot more K-dramas, though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they've
Seems like
really
that's their most popular stock these days.
yeah. But I don't know. I think that's also because obviously like K-dramas have had like a resurgence lately. I mean, they've always been like popular, at least.
They just got internationally
Yeah,
acclaimed.
for sure. I think so. So, yeah, but I mean, I don't know. I grew up around K-dramas and like Latin shows, like soap operas, so I'm so used to them, and like remakes and stuff like that. But yeah, now there's that. So, good job Netflix, I guess.
So we're gonna be talking like what are we reading right now? You start off. What are you currently reading? We haven't done this segment in a while. We're gonna be doing what are we reading, and then recommendations as well after.
Sure. Right now, I've been reading a lot. Lately, generally every year, I try to challenge myself to read like a certain amount of books and stuff like that. It's just, obviously to expand my own personal library and what have you. So, I've been reading a bunch, and right now I am reading this book called Pachinko, and it is by Min Jin Lee, I think her name is, or his name is, or it's Lee Min Jin. I'm not sure. Let me just verify that. Yeah, Min Jin Lee. I guess she's a Korean author, so probably officially Lee Min Jin. But anyways, yeah, so Pachinko is about I've just started it, but it's basically, it spans a few decades, but it starts off in colonial Korea after basically just 20 years after Japan annexed Korea. And this was before the Korean War, so obviously.
What time period is that?
When was that? What, 1900s? Early 1900s?
Okay.
That would be.
Okay.
Yeah, so around that time. And
What is so around World War One?
I guess,
Or
yeah.
earlier than that?
Or a little earlier than that, no?
Oh, it depends.
Yeah. So, but this was before. So basically, the Korean Peninsula was kind of like a united country.
Okay.
Is what it is. But so it's been really good so far. I really like how straightforward the writing is, and how vivid a lot of the scenes are. But I really like historical fiction to begin with, so it's my jam, and I've been liking it so far. Would I recommend it? I don't know yet, based off of this, just because I don't know much about the characters yet.
Uh-huh.
I don't know much about the plot yet.
What is something you would recommend?
I don't like recommending books just off like the top of my head. You know what I mean? Like just off the top of like having read like the first what?
No, but what is something you would recommend?
Oh, something I would recommend. Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't hear you. Well, I also did recently read, and I don't know if I recommended this before, but I guess not, because we haven't talked about recommendations for a long time. But I also recently read this book called Dear America: Notes of an Undocumented Citizen, and we were talking about this book.
Right.
It's by Jose Antonio Vargas, and he's this Filipino American journalist, who it turns out he moved to the United States when he was 12 years old or 10 years old, something like that. He was really young. And he didn't know that he actually was brought to the US illegally until he was about 16, 17. So what it was he was just like, hey, all my friends are starting to drive. I should learn how to drive too. So he took his green card to the DMV, and then the lady at the counter was just like, dude, this is fake. And then he's like, what? And then his grandfather confesses that, he was here illegally. He didn't have real papers, and that basically they had a whole plan to keep him, kind of like to keep his real legal status secret until he can, get, I guess, legal papers to be in the US. And I guess it just touched me on many levels, personally, because obviously I'm Filipino, and like there's a lot of like cultural references, linguistic references, and even the way he wrote was very much like, yes, that is exactly how someone who grew up with this language, the same language, would write in English. That's not to say he's not fluent. He's amazing. He's a journalist.
Yeah, he's a journalist, right?
Yeah, so but it's just that I can see aspects of my own writing as well in that way, and I can sort of see my personality in him also in the way he writes as well. So that was really neat. But also the fact that, he's a journalist of color who really worked his way up and, really improved his craft. And I think that's also really neat, and I really look up to that, I would definitely recommend that, especially for people who want to understand more about, I guess, how difficult it can be to immigrate, and, I guess how difficult it is to be separated from family, and also the lengths that I guess other people would go to unite families, even if it means, I guess, unfortunately, doing something that is kind of like not legal. So I think it just offers an empathetic point of view.
Right.
It doesn't, like, Jose Antonio, he doesn't justify, what his grandparents did, that they brought him to the US illegally, but like he definitely, asks, I guess, just for compassion. And I think that's what we need to look at it. Like, that's the way we need to look at it, is like maybe with like a little more compassion. And I appreciate that. So that's all. Like, it's just kind of like, it's a nice read. So I would recommend that.
Yeah, totally. It's a nice perspective, or alternate perspective. If alternate you were just born in the North Americas, or in Europe, or the North Americas, or first world countries. But my recommendation, or what I'm reading right now,
and what's your recommendation?
Yeah, so what I'm reading right now is the second book in the Wheel of Time series, called The Great Hunt. I'm about 100 pages in.
How many pages is it?
In the 800s somewhere.
Ugh, forget it.
So there's, in the Wheel of Time series, there's 14 books. Each one is about 800 some pages.
No.
And then I think the last one is like more than that.
Wasn't it 800? The first one?
The first one was like 800, but I said the last one might be, I think it might be longer than the others. But anyway, so it's a crazy long book series, and I finally, in between, like, we recorded, in between that kind of little hiatus, I finished the first book, which took me forever to read, but by gone, it was an amazing book. So I was like, okay, I'm going to start the second one. And I've been reading it. It's been an amazing series. If you like fantasy, it's totally up your alley. And like, it's one of the fantasy classics. Like, anyone who likes this stuff has to read it. It's what that literature was literally born from.
It's required reading, according to Reece.
Yeah, because it's so amazing. Because like in the first book, there's so many. You can see how like modern fantasy media, like movies, TV shows, books, all were in some way inspired by that book, and it was really cool to see so many parallels, like in that with media that's considered amazing, like in Avatar: The Last Airbender, one of the like highest critically acclaimed TV shows of all time.
Heck yeah.
It took so much inspiration, I noticed, from the Wheel of Time series, at least the first book. Well, however far in I am now, it's very inspired by it. So I thought that was really cool. And
I can't really verify that fact he just stated because I've never read this book series.
It's so similar. It's so similar. But I guess if you like that kind of stuff, like it's this book is totally for you. Now, the first book, it does start off very slow, of course, because it has so much mythos and so much lore, and to set the setting and everything, like, don't expect to be in until you're about 500 pages in.
Yeah, no, I'm not that patient. I'm sorry. I need action like right away.
There's
in
action
this book that I'm
in the
reading.
first few hundred pages,
Really?
but
this book
you
that
don't
I'm
get
reading,
invested until like paid into like the 500s.
This
probably.
book that I'm reading, literally in the first like few pages, they're like, oh yeah, this guy has like a club foot and a cleft palate, and no one wants to marry him, but then this poor girl marries him anyway, and they have a daughter, and that daughter gets pregnant out of wedlock, and they're all screwed. And it's just like, great, thanks.
In this book, like in the first like 40 pages, there's stuff that is set up like mysteries that aren't enacted upon for books later. So.
I would hate that. I think I would stab
books.
my eyes out. Like, I would literally gouge my eyes out, I
but
think.
There's just so much other stuff going on in the meantime that like you don't even know, like you don't even notice.
See,
you're just on for the ride, and
you know
it's
what?
incredible.
I have to admit, I do appreciate that about fantasy novels, and it's just it's so good, and the worlds are always rich, but that's something that I guess because especially nowadays, I just don't have time to spend to read like 500 pages. Whereas, when I was younger, I read a lot of fantasy because I absolutely loved it. And I still do, don't get me wrong. And occasionally I still read fantasy, but I do notice that it is very, very slow. Like the buildup is so slow. And for example, Dawn of Wonder, that's like what, 500, 600 pages, but it's
600 some, I think.
The build up to anything was just so excruciating.
Oh yeah, the book didn't take off until 400.
Yeah, and that was to me just like so painful. And I'm just like, ugh. I mean, as much as I loved The Witcher, like Blood of Elves, man, that book is so stupid slow.
Really?
I'm sorry, but like I love it, but
I've only read the first like
so slow.
First 80 pages probably before I
yeah, no, it doesn't.
I didn't finish it.
It doesn't take off until much later, and even then, it cuts off at a cliffhanger, and I'm just like, I'm gonna throw myself off a cliff.
Luckily, there's so much more books and games, even though they're not the same universe. It's still the same fix. But Dawn of Wonder, though, my favorite book ever. Waiting for that sequel. Oh yeah, it's incredible. It's a fantasy book, but it more uses the setting of fantasy rather than that's what the book is about, if that makes sense. The themes are definitely non-fantasy, but man, that's a good book. But again, the book doesn't even, it feels like it's like multiple books in one. Like,
because there's so many adventures that happen, and I guess like different growths and stories.
Yeah, and like the main part of the book doesn't even start until like halfway.
Yeah, which, not gonna lie, kind of pissed me off.
I loved the build up though. Like I loved, because it feels like more content for me, because it's that could have been a book, but now I get 2 books, like, and I love it. And it, not saying that the first half of Dawn of Wonder is bad, because it's incredible. It's incredible start to finish, but there's just different stories being told, and it all works together, and it's all amazing. And I couldn't recommend Dawn of Wonder enough, but my recommendation is going to be the comic series Invincible. So Invincible, it's an Image comic, and it's their most highly successful one. Been running from, or I don't know about that for sure, but I'm pretty sure it is. But it's been running for absolute ever, and it just wrapped up. So it started like early 2000s, and it's just finishing.
Okay, it just finished. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and there's hundreds of issues, and it's deceiving because the art style is fun and simplistic, but like what it's actually about when you get to the meat of it in like 20 issues in or whatever, like it's really dark and brutal, and there's so much learning that happens. Like, I like it because it's not like other comic books where, you know, lessons tend to be learned and forgotten and relearned frequently. I hate writers that do that so much. It'll be like the same character learns the same lesson like 10 times in the space of like 10 issues.
Well, maybe they are just a little slow.
It's bad
Don't
writing.
be mean.
No, it's bad writing. But in the Invincible series, like that happens occasionally, but for the most part, like you see the characters grow up as you read it, and it's a very
satisfying.
Yeah. If you're into comics, or if you want to, you know, start, I'd recommend
you want
the
a little
Invincible
something
comic
different.
series. It might be hard to find. I just do it digitally, so it's very readily accessible.
Well, especially right now, I guess it's a little hard to find if you can't go to an actual bookstore where they might have comics.
So Comixology, it should be on there. Because it's an Image comic, you can't really use DC Comics or Marvel Comics' apps. So check Comixology for it. Invincible. It's such a good. It looks very simplistic and very lighthearted, but it's the farthest thing from that if you stick with it and get to actually get like in the ins and the outs of it. So good. But yeah, all right, that's it for this week's episode.
Yeah. So in short, you know, read some books, read some comics, watch some shows,
entertain
and
yourself.
Movies, you know, play some games. You're going to get through this. You're going to be just fine. Wash your hands and clip your nails. That really helps. It does. Take care of yourselves. Yeah.
Shower regularly.
Yes, please shower regularly.
A good one.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.